Geometry CNA students. Today we're going to take a look at our calendar to start with and kind of project out what the week will look like. Currently I'm in the remote chapter 11 section, calendar page. And as you can see today, the 23rd, we're going to be doing our OneNote check-in, which is what we're doing now, just kind of taking a look at things. Collaboration space video lesson, and then Q&A. Yes, I'm going to be teaching a lesson, which is on page 471. And we'll talk about, again, possibly where you can access the Q&A page in the collaboration space. Let's start off taking a look at section 11.5. So this is in your notes, page 471, as you can see. And at the top, what I've done also is I've embedded a PDF file version of the notes. So if you want to print off the blank version of the notes, please feel free. Just double click on it, and it'll open up down here as a PDF. You can print that off if you'd rather, let's say you can't print it off, for example, if you'd rather get out a sheet of paper and start jotting things down in advance, whether you use the PDF or not, it can set you up quite nicely for note-taking. All right, so let's take a look. Section 11.5. Title of today's lesson is Circumference of a Circle. So we have been talking about circles in chapter 11. As we can see here, the first depiction just simply gives us what the center is, which we already know. The second depiction is just highlighting the diameter of a circle. The third picture, the radius, and then lastly, the fourth picture highlights the circumference of a circle. In other words, a representation, kind of like perimeter would be for a polygon, but the distance around the circle. The circumference does come with a formula, and that'll be found in the examples subsequent to those. Examples: find the circumference of each circle. So here's your circle. You can see here that there is a diameter of 6 centimeters. I'm going to go ahead and highlight that in the picture. C equals 6. So here's the first formula. Circumference C equals pi times diameter. Because we know the diameter is 6, we're going to use that in the context of the equation such that C equals pi times 6. You do have a calculator that can do this for you, hopefully. Your calculator has a pi button as well. If you locate it on the TI graphing calculator, or try to locate it, it's second and then the caret key above the division button, and you'll end up with that decimal, 18.8 roughly. 85 if they round to the nearest 2 decimals. And then they're going to go ahead and finalize with a rounding up of 19 centimeters. In some cases, I'll prefer 6 pi as an answer, and that's in centimeters still. Or in other cases, I'll prefer this decimal. Very rarely will I ask you to round it, like 19 centimeters, for example, is highlighted. But again, any one of those three could be an option. Likely 6 pi will be used more often than not, while 18.85 maybe as a second option. In the second example, we have a radius of 5 meters, in which then the equation to be utilized is this. Circumference equals 2 pi r. Now let's think about why these two equations are related. Well, we hopefully recall from back in a prior section that the diameter of a circle is equal to 2 times the radius. And if we already know that the equation of circumference from the last example is pi times d, well, it makes sense then that because d is 2r, well, you could just replace d with 2r, so 2 pi r is your new formula. In this case, because the radius is 5, we'll plug it in accordingly, so 2 pi times 5. Of course, 2 times 5 is 10. This is one answer, 10 pi meters, and if I type it in on the calculator, I'll end up with 31.41. We round to 2 decimals. In this case, they only round to 1. 31 is the rounded final answer, as they suggest, but again, I would argue that these two are better in general when I do problems with you. And the last problem was centimeters. Okay, let's take a look. So the first 5 questions are going to relate to those same things, basically finding the circumference of a circle. So number 1, we see here that the diameter is 14. So if we're going to use the equation C equals pi times d, in other words, what? 14 pi feet. If I were to rewrite this as a decimal, let's round our decimals to the nearest tenth place for consistency and simplicity. I end up with 43.98, or this one I will round actually to 44. It's close enough to 44, so 44. Okay, I'm going to take a look now at number 2. In this case, we have a different problem which highlights what the radius as 8 inches. So the circumference of this circle would be 2 times pi times the radius, 8. We do that math, and that, of course, 2 times 8 ends up being 16, so 16 pi inches. That's one decent answer in most problems that we'll see, but another good or decent answer would be, well, the decimal version. And like I said earlier, rounded to the nearest tenth place, so 50.3. 50.3. And again, in inches. Okay. Now we do have more problems, 3 through 5. I'll leave those problems for you to take on your own. And if you take a look again at the homework that I highlighted earlier on the calendar, as well as the notes to finish up with, this should take you through. And these problems are very much the same type of situation that we just dealt with. So let's move on to something a little bit different. Numbers 6 and or 7. It says solve round to the nearest inch. Number 6, what is the circumference of the top of an ice cream cone if its diameter is about 1 7/8 inches? Okay, so interestingly, a picture is important in most cases. I think it's not as crucial in this case because they tell you the diameter right away. Okay, so interestingly, it is a word problem, but not a whole lot different really than the prior questions that dealt with diameter. So again, because they want circumference, that equals pi times d. Now d is in fact 1 7/8 inches, which is the same as 1 plus 7/8, which is 1.875. So that's what I'm going to use in the context of formula, which ends up being, if I multiply by pi, 5.89. Again, rounded to the nearest tenth, so 5.9. I will say that as far as putting this into the proper context of using pi, well, it might be advantageous. Let me write my answer down as a decimal first. 5.9. Rounded up 6 inches. 5.9 inches, so 6 inches. So there's an example of a good time to round, possibly. Well, we didn't do that in prior questions, but that's acceptable, or at least, leaving it as a decimal to the nearest tenth place. We'll round it up. Kind of makes sense here in this case, I think. Anyways, back to the idea of rewriting your answer just in terms of pi. Well, 1 7/8 inches we can rewrite as, well, 8 times 1 is 8 plus 7. That would be 15/8 inches. So that's another version of this. And if you want to double check with that idea, again, you can just divide 15 by 8, and of course you get the same decimal. So my point here is, well, we can write then the answer instead of as a decimal, in theory, 15 pi over 8 inches. That's another good representation, really, if not the best representation for this type of thing in most cases. Let's move on to number 7. The radius of the basketball rim is 9 inches. What is its circumference? So again, we've got radius, we've got circumference. A picture may not be necessary here. If you'd like to draw a picture at any time, I encourage that if it helps. Certainly in other problems we've done in the past, it's necessary. In this case, like number 6, I don't think it's necessary. So circumference equals 2 pi times r, which ends up being 18 pi. That is a good final answer, I would argue, if in fact they didn't say leave your answer in terms of pi. But in this case, they want it to the nearest inch, so we'll go ahead and do that, simply multiplying 18 times pi, which is 56.5. And again, I'm going to round that up to 57. This concludes our notes for section 11.5.